You're watching NRATV with Bill Whittle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Hot Mike Show, live from Los Angeles. I'm Bill Whittle. Hot Mike can't be here today. He's having his, he's having something pierced. I hope to have him back by tomorrow. Today I want to talk about Christianity and the culture, the way that culture has changed an awful lot. That's pretty much all we talk about is how the culture has done an almost a complete 180-degree turn from the way it was even as late as the 70s or even the 80s. Christianity all throughout history in terms of, I'm talking about pop culture and American history now, has always been treated with a great deal of reverence. And you can remember TV shows in the black and white era with families would sit down and you'd often see them praying before dinner and so on. Same thing in the movies. The movies used to show Christianity in an extremely positive light. We talked just a couple days ago about It's a Wonderful Life. And that, of course, has elements, all of it. All of it. It's been there forever. And among the many things that the culture has inverted is the perception of Christians and Christianity and how they're portrayed. I have a couple of examples for you here in just a minute, but when we talk about this, it's all the way across the pop culture. It's movies, it's television, comedy, especially things like The Daily Show, which just love to do nothing but go down and, mock people in the middle of Arkansas or something like that. They have a real kick out of that. Some video games have a pretty nasty view of Christianity. We're going to take a specific example of that in a minute. News obviously is pretty anti-Christian, and so is sports. So why don't we start with sports? Because by happy coincidence, I happen to have a slight personal connection to this particular aspect of our topic today. I want to talk a little bit about Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow, as you know, was the Florida Gator Heisman Trophy quarterback, and I know this because I was a Florida Gator myself. I watched him all throughout basically the entire time he played for the Gators. And Tim Tebow had a habit of praying before the game, and he would put biblical quotes on the blackouts underneath his eyes, and he did this routinely. Now, the pop culture, in terms of ESPN and Sports Illustrated and a lot of other football players, especially when he got in the NFL, basically said this is arrogance. That's pretty much what they said. They said this is arrogant of him to get down on his knees and pray and stuff before a game. He's showboating. He's calling attention to himself. This is from an industry where after you score a touchdown, you're expected to do a tribal dance of chest thumping and everything you possibly can to show basically that the warrior has made the kill, and so it's a little tough for me, given the quality of the end zone dances, which are superb, by the way, and are one of my favorite parts of pro football, and the absence of which is one of my favorite parts of college football. But to say that it's arrogant and calling attention to yourself, I think is a pretty thin excuse. Most professionals, I'm sure every professional in the sports business knows, and most of his fans know, I think probably most of the country knows, that Tim Tebow is a remarkable guy, a very devout Christian. My understanding is that he was, I think he was either expected to suffer from birth defects or perhaps was even scheduled to be aborted or something. He's a remarkable story. In any event, he's a devout Christian, and as a teenager, he went to the Philippines as a missionary. He did missionary work as a teenager and provided the kind of leadership on the field that I think is, just speaking personally, is unmatched. And I'll show you what I mean. What you're about to see is a clip from the 2008 Gator season, which I watched very closely. Having gone to the University of Florida, we were 0-10-1, by the way, when I first got there. Florida had previously won a national championship, but they'd never gone undefeated. And about midway through the season, in what should have been a pretty easy game against Ole Miss, the Florida Gators lost that game by 1 point, 31-30. After the game was over, there is the normal time for the post-game press conference, and that usually happens just in the time it takes for a player to get undressed and into some clean clothes and come out in front of the cameras. But in this particular case, after this game, there was quite a delay. I understand it was like a 45-minute delay. Tim Tebow came out speaking for the team, And he gave the most remarkable speech, leadership speech I've ever witnessed personally in real time. And this has nothing to do with Christianity, but it has a great deal to do with humility. So let's just run 1 minute of Tim Tebow's post-loss press conference from back in, was it 2008?
And I just want to say one thing to the fans and everybody in Gator Nation. I'm sorry. Extremely sorry. You know, we were hoping for an undefeated season. That was my goal. Something Florida's never done here. But I promise you one thing. A lot of good will come out of this. You have never seen any player in the entire country play as hard as I will play the rest of the season, and you never see someone push the rest of the team as hard as I will push everybody the rest of the season, and you never see a team play harder than we will the rest of this season. God bless.
God bless. A lot of people come out after football games and they lose, and sometimes they're surly, and sometimes they're upset, and sometimes they're genuine, and rarely they're as genuine as Tim was there, but that's not the part I'm interested in. First of all, he said, "I'm sorry, it's our fault. We let you down." You don't hear that too often. But the thing that struck me so much about that was where he went with it. He said, "You will never see a team or a person play harder, practice harder than we will from this point because we let you down." And guess what? Florida continued the rest of the season undefeated, became national champions. Tim Tebow lived up to his word, and Gators that year were 2 points away from being undefeated. One more point for the tie and one for the win. The character that he exhibited in that press conference was so clear to me, and so shockingly clear and so impressive and so inspiring that I'm amazed to this day at the blowback towards Tim Tebow. And the reason so many people have so much negativity towards Tim Tebow is because he's openly Christian. He doesn't make any apologies about it. And in a business like the NFL, very similar to the movie business, where sin is in fact the the currency, an example like that has to go. There's one other thing before we bring in our guest today. Video games traditionally, well, I say traditionally, certainly recently, have actually been relatively patriotic. We talked about this just a few days ago. Titles like Call of Duty allow you to play American soldiers and usually reflect very well on the military and the military ethics and so on. And so most video games have had a pretty patriotic attack, at least the first-person shooter games. However, there's a first-person shooter game coming out. I first saw the trailers for this 6 months ago, and the second I saw the first one, I knew exactly what was going on. I want to set this clip up for you. It is a trailer for a video game. It's actually shot in the video game. That's how good the graphics are getting now. You'll see. And what this video game is called is it's called Far Cry 5. But in Far Cry 5, there's a villain come to an American town, and let's just see if we can figure out who the villain is, shall we?
Something is coming. You can feel it, can't you? You can feel that we are creeping towards the edge. I know that you are out there. And I know that you are in pain. But my children, I'm here to tell you that suffering is a choice. And you can choose a better path. We want you, we accept you, and we will take you, willingly or not. And some of you may fight, but in the end, you will thank us. I am your father, and you are my children.
Upon us! I shall lead you to the gate! For you are my children, and I am your father.
Far Cry 5, Trust, Pray, Obey. Made by Montreal branch, I think, of Ubisoft. Now, one of the reasons we have this show is because I've been a screenwriter, I've been a film director, and I understand how messaging works, and I understand the nuances, and I also understand things like political cover. So, just to be clear, in this game, they're claiming that this is a cult. As a matter of fact, they're clever enough to have one of the characters in rebellion to this cult be a priest, or a pastor rather, from a Christian cult. So basically, you do see the cross of Christianity go down, and this symbol comes up, and throughout the game and throughout the description of the game, they talk about this as a cult. But we know what's going on. Those are Christian churches. That was a baptism that person was being forced to undergo, screaming and yelling and kicking. The language, the imagery, all of it. In fact, they didn't go real far for the symbol of their cult, did they? They basically just talk across and put a couple little flame sparks off to the side there. This is what they have done. They've set up a video game where there is an attempt to rally an American resistance, patriotic, regular Americans, guy who owns a auto shop and a woman who owns a bar. And they're going to go out there and they're going to kill these religious fanatics who are forcing them to their religion. And they've set it up so it's America versus Christianity. And I think it's very clear. It's clear to me. They can deny it all they want to. It's clear to me, crystal clear to me. That's exactly what they're doing. And furthermore, that's what they think about you. That's what these people think about you. They think you're a bunch of woolly rednecks sitting in a little church out in the middle of nowhere, going yeehaw and shooting your pistols in the air when you get a chance to forcibly convert somebody or shoot them if they leave your particular religious cult. Turns out there is a religious cult that will shoot you if you leave it, but it's not Christianity. So let's bring in our guest who we've had on before. He's a terrific guy. He's a former Army intelligence officer. He's got his own show called The Stephen Solomon Show. He's also a pastor. Stephen, good to have you back.
It's always great to be with you, Bill. Good to see you.
Thank you. And let's just get started with movies, Stephen. If you've been paying attention for the last 20 years or so, if you see a Christian, some kind of a minister in a movie, you have two choices. It's either going to be a pedophile Roman Catholic priest or a snake-handling Baptist lunatic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's becoming more clear that Hollywood and pop culture in general is tolerant of everything but Christianity. And I single out Christianity because that is the one thing that our culture does not seem to allow any sort of wiggle room on. That if you are dyed-in-the-wool Christian, or if you believe in Jesus Christ with all your heart and you want to tell people about him, that you're the crazy person, you're the extreme person. And as we just saw in that video game, I think that was a great example of this. And as we see in movies and everywhere else, Christianity is the one thing in culture that is no longer allowed. It's sad.
It's very sad, and it's going to have long-term effects. So you're absolutely right. It's not allowed. So let's just look back for last couple years or so. It's certainly in Europe, and to some degree here, Islam is calling for Sharia courts. Now, they haven't had much luck with them here, although I've heard in Michigan they're getting pretty close. But according to Islamic Sharia law, there are rules for how you can beat your wife and all of this. We don't have to go over this. We know what it is. But if somebody were to say, somebody who owned a little bakery, let's say, that somebody comes in and says, we'd like you to make a birthday cake for a lesbian wedding, let's just get the facts straight here. The people who had that Christian bakery said, no, we'd be happy to do that. But they asked them to deliver it, and they said, no, we choose not to because our faith just tells us that this is wrong. Those people were national news for 2-3 weeks. That bakery was run out of business. They were basically burned at the stake because they had a religious belief that simply said, my religious beliefs don't allow me to do this. Let's be crystal clear about this. They didn't say, get the hell out of my bakery. They didn't say, you people are horrible. They didn't say, you're not allowed to be married. They didn't say any of that. They said, my personal religious beliefs are this, and so I respectfully decline. And that had to be destroyed.
Yeah, it's become militant. And that's the word that I use on my show all the time, that the left is militant now. They are the aggressors. I think somebody has worded it really well. I don't know who it was, but I'll steal it and call it my own here. But it belongs to somebody else. They say that if you have a Christian neighbor, you have nothing to fear from your Christian neighbor. But it can't be said of a secular government-loving neighbor. They're the ones that are going to tell you what you can and can't do with your property. They're the ones that are going to tell you what you can and can't do with your children. They're the ones that are going to make sure all the codes are followed and all that stuff. It's the Christian that wants to be left alone and live life peacefully. I think a great example of this, Bill, when we look at government, is Bernie Sanders. I don't know if you saw the video or not, but Bernie Sanders, and I could have the government agency wrong, but Bernie Sanders was doing the Senate hearing for a man, I think it was the deputy secretary of the OMB, and he was coming up for his nomination. And a thing that he wrote when he was at college, I believe as a professor, maybe late term as a student, about Jesus Christ being the only way to salvation. And, you know, you can't get to heaven through Islam. You can't get to heaven through atheism or anything like that. You've got to go through Jesus. At a Christian college, by the way, Bernie Sanders was railing against this man. And the guy kept saying, I'm a Christian. What do you expect from me? Of course I believe Jesus is the only way. And Bernie Sanders came out and said, you know what? I don't think he's qualified to be the deputy director of this department. And it was based on his Christian beliefs. It's clear where the left is in this country when it stands to Christianity.
Yes, and so what they will do, they do the same thing with us politically as well. They have a cartoon image of what Christians and conservatives look like, and they will continue to push that image, not only in the absence of any evidence, but in fact with evidence to the contrary. I like what you just said a minute ago. You know, Christians basically want to be left alone. They do want people to, if they believe that they are going to be saved by their faith, they would like people to know that. That's certainly their right, but they're not coercing anybody. No one's being forced. There are no pickup trucks in America going down the streets of America with machine guns on there, rounding people up to pull them into church the way there was in that video game. As I said, there are countries where this happens, but this isn't one of them. So, yeah, we tolerate these things that are intolerable, and the things that have basically no grounds whatsoever for any basis of really of being able to say this is offensive. The country just goes nuts. What it comes down to, Stephen, is that the left thinks, now I don't even know if they think, I suspect they probably know the truth, but in any event, the left constantly shrieks that America is on the edge of becoming a theocracy when these lunatic Christians take over the government and force everybody to get down on their knees and pray to Jesus Christ. That is a very poor understanding of conservatives, a poor understanding of the Constitution, a poor understanding of the United States of America, and a very poor understanding of Christianity as a religion.
It's a very poor understanding of Christianity. I mean, think about what you just said. If you were supposed to force people to be Christians, that takes away from the gospel message entirely. I mean, if the president of the United States or Congress could pass a law and send government agents to your home to forcibly baptize you or whatever, make you take communion and pray, that wouldn't be from the heart. And so by extension, your salvation would not be real. So that alone would say Christians don't want to force anybody into this. But again, it goes back to the intolerance that the culture we live in has for Christianity. I think it's important to note that within history, the greatest killer of people, the mass killer of people, is atheistic communistic governments. The left has done a great job saying it's religion, it's Christianity. They're the great killers in history. It's actually atheism and communism.
Absolutely correct. I've heard people say that Adolf Hitler launched his Holocaust against the Jews because of his Christian religious beliefs. That's absolute nonsense. You can read into this as deep as you want to. Hitler and Goebbels especially realized that you couldn't go into Germany and attack religion first. Hitler just wanted power. But they had plans to clean up the church when the war was over. And that says nothing about Stalin, and it says nothing about Mao or Pol Pot or Hugo Chavez, or Fidel Castro, or any of the rest of these mass murderers. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking with Steve Solomon and talking about the charges of hypocrisy against Christians that are leveled against Christianity and the culture. This is the Hot Mic Show. I'm Bill Whittle on NRATV. We'll be right back.